Hello and welcome to another AIC Productions video. Today I wanted to go over swapping your OS from an internal drive to another drive. So this is something I've talked about in like my video on an HP laptop that's pretty popular, and some of my other laptop reviews where there's an internal eMMC drive that you can then upgrade to like a larger 2.5-inch drive or like an M.2 or something. So we're going to go through some of the steps. This obviously is not that laptop. I don't own that laptop anymore, but this is a laptop I want to upgrade the hard drive on, or the storage drive I should say. I'm also going to upgrade the memory, so it has 16 gigs of RAM in there, so I have 12. So some of the things you need obviously is you need a drive, a screwdriver with an appropriate bit. We'll also go over installing an OS from USB drive. So I have a couple different USB drives that you can use. These are some of my favorite. I like this one because it has a micro USB port on there. So if you ever need to boot like a tablet that doesn't have a full-size USB drive, they offer these. And you'll need at least an 8 gig USB drive. I recommend getting one that's a USB 3. This laptop doesn't have USB 3 on it, so it takes a little bit longer, but I just have one of these that's on my keyring. It looks like this. It's metal. I'll put a link to it in the description. It's a Transcend, I believe is the brand. And this was the old one. This is just a USB 2. I got one that's a USB 3. Focus. You can see the wear on this. This was on my keyring for like 4 or 5 years. And so I want to say this is a 32 gig one. I upgraded to USB 3 and 64 gigs. So I just have one of these always on my keyring that I keep different files on. I highly recommend it because the one that I use now, here I'll show you, is extremely compact. It's extremely compact, and it just hides in with the rest of my keys. Don't even know it's there, but I always have a 64 gigs of storage on me, and this comes in handy oh so often. I use it for work. If I'm working with a vendor, they want to give me a file. I use it to if I go over to like my parents' house and they need to give me some documents, or if I'm going to be going to like Walmart and I'm printing some pictures or something like that, I always just have a USB drive. I know exactly where it is. I don't have to find it. It's got tons of room on it. Anyways, the other thing that you'll need is some sort of device to plug the laptop or the hard drive into the laptop. So this is the one I use. It was a full enclosure, and then I lost the lid to the enclosure, and then the body of the enclosure got a crack in it and didn't hold. So this has been around for, I think I've had this for 6 or 7 years now, and it's pretty worse for wear. Well, I'll put a link to a couple different ones that I would recommend in the description down below, but this is the one I use. They last a long time. It's just the plastic on this was cheap, and so the plastic didn't last very long. So this is the software I use personally for imaging drives. The only reason why I use it over anything else is because it's the one I've used and it's the one I'm familiar with. There are other ones out there. I'm sure there's ones that are better that are out there. This just happens to be the one I'm most familiar with. Then if you want to create a bootable USB drive, if you just Google Windows Media Creation Tool, this very first link says download Windows 10 disk image. It gives you this page, and we'll go over this second of all. I did do some performance tests on this just to show the difference before and after the upgrades. So the pass mark rating is 1491. The CPU mark is 5760. And the disk mark, which is the more important one, is 7147. And the reason why this is important is because we're going to be doing some upgrades, and we want to see if the upgrades were worthwhile. Alright, so I want to make sure that what we're doing is worth the effort. So the 3D graphics mark on this, I'm always a little sad because the CPU or the GPU doesn't support one of the newer tests, and so you get not a very good score out of it because it doesn't complete the last couple of tests there. Let's go to exit that. If we go to 3D mark, it doesn't complete the Direct 10 or the Direct 12 correctly. So anyways, let's go ahead and close out this. Oh, I also ran Cinebench, and I got 436, which I think is almost 100 points higher than what I got before. The first time I ran it, I just didn't get all that great of a score. So, but 436 is the score I got this time around. No, I don't want to save that. Alright, so let's go ahead. I already installed Macrium Reflect. You can see the drive that's there. Let's go ahead and plug in the new drive. And we'll probably need to format it because it's one I've used in the past. And unfortunately this computer does not have USB 3 ports on it. So it is not going to be as quick. Fresh. There's the new drive. So first thing we're going to do is format this old drive. So to format the drive, we just go into here, right click on the drive, and go to format, and we're just going to do a quick format. I did pause to make sure everything is off of this disk. You go up here and you click clone this disk, and you select the drive you want to clone to, which is this one. Now it's a smaller disk than the one we're cloning from, which is going to be a bit of a problem. That's alright. Go ahead and hit next, and it says insufficient space, right? Because we're doing a smaller thing. So you're going to uncheck this box right here, and then that should let us continue. Yep. And hit finish, and OK. And the clone is started, and this will take, depending on the size of your drive, anywhere from 20-30 minutes to an hour or two, just really depending on how big the drive is. Alright, so the Reflect has been going for about an hour or so now, and it's about less than a third of the way through. So we're going to go ahead and move on to using our thumb drive to create a bootable media with. So let's go ahead and go plug this in. I just checked to make sure that is an empty USB drive. You want to make sure there's nothing on your drive. And go ahead and on the Windows 10, again, you just Google Windows Media Creation Tool, and it's typically your very first link. You click Download Tool Now. Go ahead and run this. Now this will take some time as well, so we'll get this process going, and then we'll come back when everything is finished up and move along. But we'll go through these first steps here till it actually starts creating the media. Now the great thing about this is typically this is version ambivalent, so this will create a version that can install home, it can install professional, ultimate I believe is another version. It doesn't matter because that's all based off your license key. So this basically just creates the base install, and then once you apply your key it unlocks the appropriate features and installs the appropriate features for your operating system. So this laptop's older, and so I'll have to get the key from under the battery. Typically though, if you have a computer that has a 4th gen Core i processor, so a Core i3, Core i5, Core i7, that's a 4th gen or newer, even some of the 3rd gens, but the 4th gens for sure, you're going to create an installation media, USB flash drive, DD, or ISO for another PC. Next. That key is part of the this is F. Just double check that here. Yeah, because this one is the new drive. Yeah, cancel that. Alright. It's part of the BIOS of the system. It's integrated into the system on a laptop or a pre-built computer. Now, if you build a computer after the fact, you have to have your own license key. But if you have a pre-built system, it's integrated into the system board, that license key, and so you don't have to worry about it. So this will take several minutes. Should be a lot faster than the Macrium Reflect. And we will continue on this in a few moments once it is finished. Alright, so the USB drive is finished. Let's go clean up. This is at 50%, so we're going to go ahead and cancel this because I'm not going to actually use the image. The whole point of this is I'm putting in a new drive and I want a nice clean install. So we're going to cancel this, but you get the gist. Once this is done, you can then install the drive and it is ready to go. Now the last thing we want to do is I highly recommend, especially on an older machine. On newer machines this isn't quite as important, but on an older machine for sure. Let me adjust the camera here so you can see what I'm doing. We're going to go to, in this case, Lenovo.com, and we're going to download the Wi-Fi drivers. So we're going to go to, oh, they changed their website on me. So on here we're going to do T520. I'm going to hit view all on downloads. Networking, we're going to go to LAN, and we're going to download the Intel wireless LAN for, should be one for Windows 8, should work. So that's for Windows 7 Vista, that's for Windows 8. Let's see here, I believe this will be the newest one. And what we're going to do is copy this onto the thumb drive. We may not need it, but it doesn't hurt to have it. Since we have a computer that has internet access right now, there's been times where I've gone to install the OS and then I didn't have a way to connect to the internet. So we're just going to create a new folder. We'll just put drivers. Alright, so we have a couple versions of the driver. Now we're going to go ahead and shut down, and we are going to do the hardware upgrades. Let's go ahead and unplug the drives, and I will adjust the camera and we will be back in just a moment. Alright, so we've started to open things up here. The DIMM here is actually the 8 gig DIMM. The 4 gig, of course, is the one that's under the keyboard, so I'm going to have to remove the keyboard to upgrade the memory. So we'll first upgrade the hard drive. Now again, this is an SSHD, which at the time was a reasonable option with this laptop when I was building this for my mother. The SSDs at the time were still very expensive. But now you can get SSDs for next to nothing. So an SSHD gave you a reasonable performance boost, especially with the operating system, boot times, tasks that you perform regularly. I believe this one has, does it say on it? I want to say this one had like 8 gigs or 16 gigs of flash storage, and then it was a 1 terabyte drive. Anymore, I don't need the capacity as much. Just about everything, music, videos, all that media I store on a network drive that is accessible via the web. And anything else, it usually doesn't take up that much room, and so I can just install, like this is a 240 gig SSD that's going in here, which should be plenty for whatever I need to put on here. So a couple games, Office, web browsers, that sort of stuff. I may boot up here like an ESXi down the road. If I do that, I will install a secondary drive that will actually house any VMs, and so the main OS drive will stay just an OS drive. I wish this had a M.2 slot on it. There's that, and then we need the rubber bumpers. So funny, I used to work with a guy who was incredibly incompetent in his tasks as a help desk, and he would take these bumpers and just throw them away. And then everybody would complain that their drives would come loose, and so he fixed it by shoving foam in there, which would then cause the drives to overheat. It was dark times for sure. I believe it's just the 2 screws I need to unscrew for the keyboard. Let's go ahead and flip this over. Let's see if that was what we needed to do. This gets pushed forward and up, and there's the memory slot. Take that out, and just to verify, yep, that's a 4 gig DIMM. We'll put in 8 gigs. Put the battery back in. We'll go ahead and readjust and be back in just another moment. Alright, we are just about ready to boot this system. One thing I wanted to note before I did is on these older ThinkPads, there's this blue Think Vantage button here. You push that as the computer comes up to boot into your boot options. With some systems, there's an F key, F1, F2, F10, 11, or 12 are your typical ones depending on the computer. Some use delete, some use escape. So you want to, before you do this, you want to see what option it is for you. Now with a lot of Windows 10 systems, and I can show you this here in a little bit, there isn't an option, and you actually have to boot into the OS. Go to settings, update recovery, and there's a option in there to boot to the UEFI settings, and I'll show you that here after we reinstall the OS. So I have my thumb drive recreated. I'm going to go ahead and plop that puppy in, hit the power button, and readjust so you guys can see the screen. Sorry for the glare behind me. Now I hit the Think Vantage. Oh, I probably didn't hit it soon enough. I was screwing around. Let's get the beep, and we want to F12. Alright, we have a few different options, but the Jet Flash Transcend 8 GB is what we want to use. And we're going to get to a point where we can select drive. I won't have you sit through the actual Windows installation. And again, on a system with a USB 3 device or plug, this will be significantly faster. The fact that this is running still on USB 2.1, I believe, it's a fair bit slower. So we'll go ahead and hit install now. And we're going to skip this for now. I do have the product key, but just for, we're going to do Pro and Next, because the key for this is for Windows Pro. Pro. Alright, and on here, accept the license terms, of course. We're going to do a custom install. Now, you see here how it has drive 0, drive 0, drive 0? These are all the same drive, but with different partitions from the previous drive. And we're just going to delete these partitions. And that deletes everything on this drive. Everything. So this drive is now an unallocated space. We're going to hit new. And just a new partition. Alright, so in some of these other systems where they have a permanent eMMC drive, that will be drive 0 most of the time. Sometimes it's drive 1, but 90% of the time it'll be drive 0. And there'll be several partitions on there. So partition 1, partition 2, 3, 4, whatever. And then if you install a secondary drive, there will be a drive 1. So 0 is actually 1, and 1 is actually 2 in binary. So you have 0 and 1, or as far as listing things in computers. So drive 0 is your first one, drive 1 is your second one. It's important to look at total size to make sure you're looking at the correct one. I highly recommend when you are installing a second drive to format or delete the partitions and create a new partition on that eMMC drive. The reason for doing that is even if you just delete all the information off of there, the computer will see it as a Windows boot drive, and every time you boot your computer you'll have to select between which boot drives you want to boot from every single time. And at least for me, that's really annoying. It slows down your boot process, and if you select the wrong thing and you've deleted everything off that drive but haven't deleted partitions, then it won't boot. You'll get a blue screen of death, or it will just error or crash or whatever. If you have installed something if you still have Windows on that drive and you boot to it, anything you do on that will be reserved to that version of Windows, right, or that installation of Windows. And then the next time you go to boot and you boot from the other version, then it'll be isolated to that. So it just creates problems. So I highly recommend having just one version of Windows installed, and do that by deleting all the partitions and then of the old drive. So if you have cloned the drive, you'd have drive 1 with its partitions down here, and then you would just delete drive 0. Now this process will take a while, so I will skip this and we will be back. Alright, so we finished up the Windows installation and then performed Windows updates, since I didn't want those running in the background when trying to do the performance test. But I wanted to show you this real quick. If you come into the settings, update and security, and then recovery, restart now, it'll give you these options. You want to click troubleshoot, advanced options, and startup settings. Select which version, how you want to boot it, and you can boot into the BIOS. Now this one, because it has the ThinkVantage, it's not an option here, but on the newer systems it lets you boot into the BIOS to make any changes, or boot from the USB if you want to set a temporary boot device. So let's go ahead and get back into Windows here, and we will run the performance test to see if that made any difference in those performance numbers. I mean, that was the point of doing this upgrade here. Okay, run the performance test. Alright, so this score crushes the previous score. Past mark previously was 1491, so we're up over 400 points. CPU mark is up, what was that? 1900 points from before. It was 5760, now it's 7603. The 2D graphics is up as well, went from 450 to 534. The 3D graphics did go down from 430 to 313, but again, that one's not a valid score on either of those because it can't complete all the tests. Memory mark went up by over 700 points, went from 1244 to 1969, and then the disk mark went up a bunch. It went from 714 to 3864. So massive difference in performance there. Let's go ahead and extract Cinebench and run that as well. And we get a score of 508, which is, what, about 60 points faster than before? 70 points faster than before, something like that. But yeah, so huge improvement in performance going from the 12 gigs to 16 gigs. We might even be running in dual channel mode now. Alright, so we have the 2760 QM and memory. Yeah, we're running in dual channel mode, so that definitely gives it a little bit of a boost as well. So yeah, awesome. I'm very happy with the performance of this machine and the improvements we made by upgrading the memory and the storage to 16 gigs and a full SSD versus the hybrid SSHD. Anyways, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section down below, and hopefully this answers any questions you might have about using the Macrium Reflect or installing Windows from a USB drive. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day.